Thinking about that question, I want to read you something from the late and great Dr. Maya Angelou, who said this. I think it's appropriate. If you're not angry, you're either a stone or too sick to be angry. You should be angry. You must not be bitter. Bitterness is like cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object or cause of its displeasure. So use that anger. Write it, paint it, dance it, march it, vote it. Do everything and anything about it. Talk about it. Never stop talking about your anger. Dr. Maya Angelou. So coming in, let me know how you're feeling. Here's the thing about anger. Some of you are saying not necessarily angry. Maybe you're feeling other things. It's interesting because anger is usually a cover for other emotions. But here's the interesting thing about anger. It's the most feared emotion of all of them. We can be a lot of things, but angry is the most unacceptable emotion. You can be sad more than you can be angry. You can be depressed more than you can be angry. You can be worried or frustrated or have anxiety more than you can be angry. Anger is unacceptable. The interesting thing about that is that whatever emotion or whatever feeling we resist, what happens? It persists. So all of this anger that we might be feeling, perhaps now or throughout the course of our lives, nobody taught us what to do with it. They only taught us that it was wrong. So feeling angry is wrong. Slamming doors is wrong. Having temper tantrums is wrong. Yelling and screaming and pounding our fists is wrong. Anger is never appropriate. At least that's the message that we got. Here's the thing about anger. By definition, it's an emotional response to the perception of a threat. So we feel that either we have been threatened, we're currently being threatened, or we will be threatened in the future. It's the perception of a threat. So anger is actually a survival mechanism. It's a mechanism that's like the fight or flight response that's triggered when we feel threatened. Now here's the thing. Anger is a cover emotion, meaning that it's a cover, literally. It masquerades the actual emotion that we're feeling underneath it. Usually when we're angry, what we're feeling is hurt or afraid. We're usually in pain. But those are the lowest vibration emotions. In fact, feeling powerless is the lowest vibration of all. When you feel powerless, like a victim, like you absolutely have no choice whatsoever, that's the lowest vibration. And so what nature did in its infinite wisdom is it gave us the gift, I'm going to use the word gift, of anger to lift us from the lowest vibration of powerlessness up a couple of notches. So anger, in fact, is a higher vibration than powerlessness. Are you following me so far? Say yes if you are. Let me know if you are. Anger is an impulse, and what it does is it's a form of self-preservation. It's a form of self-protection when we feel threatened. And so what anger does that is so frightening, and the reason it's perceived as so dangerous, is it separates us, which is really frightening because every human being, what they ultimately need and want is a very survival mechanism, is to pull people close. But what anger does is it separates. And that's why it's perceived as so dangerous. But here's the thing about anger. It's an emotion. There's no such thing as unhealthy anger. If you were taught as a child or growing up that your anger was wrong or unhealthy or needed to be tamed or needed to be more constructive or productive, that's actually a form of abuse mentally. Because your anger is there to protect you. It actually serves a purpose. There's no such thing as unhealthy anger. Now, there are unhealthy actions that we can take as the result of anger. Those can be unhealthy, like punching someone or hurting someone or throwing a chair through the window, but those are the actions, not the emotion itself. Anger's an emotion, and an emotion is information. Now, whether or not the anger is justified or real or right or fair or makes sense or is appropriate or inappropriate, that's all perception. And quite frankly, it's absolutely irrelevant. Anger is always valid because it's an emotion. Emotions are always valid. Again, it doesn't matter if you think my anger is justified, if my boss thinks my anger is justified, if my partner thinks my anger is justified. If I'm feeling it, it's justified. It's my feeling. Now, here's the thing about emotions. Emotions are information. It's like the gas gauge on your car. It's telling you, you are here. It's pointing you in the direction of something. So when I asked in my group, I think it was earlier today, I asked, what do you do when you feel anger? A lot of people said things like, I try to reframe it with gratitude. I take my anger and I try to calm myself down. I take my anger and I meditate. I take my anger and I try to think positively. I take my anger and I do something fun. I take my anger and I cook. And I think it's very precious and I think it's very sweet because people like me in the spiritual world and the personal development world for so long have told you that's exactly what you should do. Say some affirmations. Think positively. Get out your gratitude book and push that anger away. Well, I'm so sorry on behalf of myself and all the other teachers who have ever told you that anger was something that you've had to dodge or avoid or was negative, because that's wrong. And like I said before, that's actually a form of abuse, because what it does is it invalidates the feeling. It causes us to doubt ourselves, to abandon ourselves, and to suppress really important information that needs to be expressed. And what happens when we suppress anything? Well, it needs to come out in some way. So this is why we have people raging, people who have bottled it up. We call it, people have outbursts, people snap. Someone who's very, very calm, but they hit a tipping point and punch a hole in the wall. I experienced that as a child. That was kind of scary. We have road rage. We have people who become extremely depressed and anxious because they've taken their anger and they've tucked it so far down that they're so disconnected from themselves that they feel helpless and powerless, which again is the lowest vibration. And so in every single one of these instances, by taking our anger and not giving space for it to be observed, to get curious about it, to ask it what it's trying to point us to give direction to give birth to, is doing ourselves a disservice. So if you're here watching this, or if you're watching this in the replay, from now on, for the rest of your entire life, I want you to remember this. Your anger is very important. Your anger is valid. And if you're particularly angry at this point in time with so much chaos and confusion and craziness going on in the world, you'd be justified to feel angry. I'm angry. And that's okay, because there's nothing wrong with anger. Anger is not unhealthy. Anger is not wrong. Anger is information. And what it does is it points us in the direction of an area that we have to pay attention to, that we have to start to ask ourselves questions. What is this anger trying to tell me? What is it telling me about myself, about my boundaries, about what's unacceptable, about what needs to change, about what I've overlooked, about other people, about the situation? What is this anger pointing me in the direction of? What information does this anger carry as a vessel to my consciousness? That's the question we need to be asking. Now, in another live, because I'm sure it's going to come up this week, I'll give you a whole bunch of tips on what to do with our anger. But what's most important at this point is that I want you to understand that if you are feeling angry, or if, and here's the interesting thing, perhaps you're not feeling angry because you've been taught it's not okay to feel angry. Perhaps what you're feeling is very fearful and sad and hopeless and powerless. That might be because you've been taught that anger is an unacceptable emotion and you don't have access to it. As soon as it comes up, you suppress it. As soon as anger comes up, you shut it down. Here's a funny thing about anger. When I went through therapy a couple of years ago, interesting thing, I could finally cry after a little bit of therapy. But you know what I couldn't do? I couldn't get angry. I could be really sad about the people who hurt me. I could be really sad about circumstances in my life. I could feel really sorry for myself, but I couldn't access anger. I couldn't access anger. I couldn't let myself get angry because there was a very real part of me that believed that angry people were bad people, that anger wasn't allowed, that anger was unacceptable. And I was never allowed to express it as a child. When I was angry as a teen and I went to my room and slammed the door, I was punished for my anger. I was ignored when I was angry. And it's what most of us do. I did it with my kids because we don't know what to do with anger. So we try to ignore it. We punish it. We try to make them calm down. We exorcise them from the room, not recognizing that anger and the healthy expression of anger is a really important life skill. And so what I want to make a case for anger, if you're feeling angry right now, it's justified. If you don't have access to your anger, that's okay. I'm going to ask you to remain open, particularly as you start a new week. And there's a lot of energy swirling around this week with everything going on globally. I want you to just remain curious about how you're feeling. Emotions are information. They are energy in motion. They are information leading you somewhere. There are no right emotions or wrong emotions. There are no good emotions and no bad emotions. It's information. You don't go to a doctor's office and get a whole litany of tests and say, I'm only going to pay attention to the good test results, not the bad test results, because I don't even want to look at the bad test results. We don't do that. It's information. So there's no good and there's no bad. It's information. It's drawing our awareness to something. And so if you've never been taught to express anger or express any emotion, let's get real. Most of us are taught only to express the good stuff like happiness and joy, and even that only during the appropriate times and places, not too much. Don't get too excited or don't be too happy or too proud of yourself. So we are confined to these tiny little boxes of emotions. Like, put all your emotions into this little box and don't scribble outside the line. Stay within this little frame of emotion. Your anger is valid. There's nothing wrong with it. And again, if you're not feeling angry because you don't have access to that emotion, then underneath that is anxiety, sadness, worry, depression, shame, powerlessness, and hopelessness. Those lie underneath anger. Anger is actually a higher vibration because what it does is it moves us out of a state of powerlessness. Hear this. Anger is a higher vibration than hopelessness. Anger is a higher vibration than shame. Anger is a higher vibration than sadness. Any emotion where we're feeling powerless, anger is actually a higher vibration. It is a step up because it's a self-preservation mechanism that pulls us away from the lowest vibration where we feel we cannot do anything. So please, I'm asking you to remain, at the very least, remain curious about how you're feeling. Remain curious about the emotions coming up. Stop judging them. Stop having shame around. I shouldn't feel this way because I'm spiritual, or because I'm evolved, or because I'm a parent, or because I'm a grown-up, or because I'm mature, or because I've developed myself professionally. Like, enough of that BS. A spiritual person can absolutely have access to every single emotion. Emotions are not wrong. The actions that we take from those emotions can be wrong, but the emotions themselves are not wrong. We've demonized emotions, we've made them bad, and what happens when we do that, particularly as children, I'm going to say this before I log off. When we were children, let's say we threw a tantrum. Let's say we got very upset about something and we got angry. What our parent most likely did is, in some form, they punished us. Now, they could punish us by yelling at us, sending us to our room, sending us to the thinking corner, maybe ignoring us. And what they did is withhold love and acceptance of our emotion. And they ostracized, they pulled themselves away from us. And when that happens as a child, that's actually a threat to our physicality. It's actually an instinctual threat, because as a child and as an adult, we need other people for our very survival. So that's like the worst thing you can do to a child. So what does the child do unconsciously? In order to bring itself closer to the parent, the child fragments itself. It fragments itself from the negative feeling in order to get closer to the parent. And when we do that over and over again, when we abandon our feelings, when we learn not to express our feelings, when we learn not to get angry, not to throw a tantrum, not to cry over spilt milk, not to be too emotional. I was told I was too emotional, not to be too sensitive. When we take how we're actually feeling and we suppress it, abandon it, stuff it, ostracize it, demonize it, what we're actually doing is abandoning ourselves. And we do this over and over and over again. We grow up into adults, and then we no longer have access. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our feelings. We haven't learned ways to process our emotion. And you can see how dangerous this can get. You get in a fight with someone and you don't have access to the emotions. Emotions are information. So if we repress the information, how can we absolutely follow our intuition, our knowing, see red flags, build our self-trust muscle? If you're in my group Spiritual G-Spot, you know how much I talk about this. I have a free course in there called Rebuilding Your Self-Trust, because I think that's the number one challenge. We don't even trust ourselves. We don't trust how we feel. We don't trust our knowing. We don't trust anything. And so the reason we don't trust ourselves is because we've been taught not to trust our feelings, not to abandon how we're feeling. Our emotions are like a GPS. So this week, which I imagine is going to be tumultuous, no matter where you are in the world. I know that there are people from all over the world on this page, but we're all feeling the effects of the tensions of this week, particularly the political tensions. Look, I'm in Canada. I am a dual citizen. I voted for in the US, of course. But no matter where you are in the world, there are tensions running high. And this is going to be a tumultuous week. And I want to give you permission, give yourself permission to have access to how you feel. Repressing it, stuffing it, ignoring it, abandoning it, saying a million affirmations, that it's not going to help you, because what you repress and suppress will express itself in some way. I care about you. We can do hard things, and I want you to know that your emotions are here to serve you. They're information. They're not to be rejected. They're not to be demonized. They're part of who you are, and they're here to serve you. I love you. Thanks for sticking around. What questions do you have? Anybody have questions? My screen is frozen. I'm going to guess that's a no, because I can't access any of your questions. So, if you have questions, drop them down. I'll answer them during the coming week. I'm sending you so much love. I hope that you feel it. I'm sending you so much love. I hope that you feel it. And I want you to know that whatever you're feeling is perfectly acceptable. There's absolutely nothing wrong with how you're feeling, ever, in this moment or ever. It's just information. We can do hard things. Good night, everybody.